Lena Moretti never imagined that answering the wrong video call at 2 a.m. would unravel her entire life, or that the man on the other end, a billionaire she'd never met, would whisper 5 words that would haunt her for weeks. Whose child is this? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The autumn rain hammered against the single-paned window of Lena's studio apartment in the deteriorating Riverside district of Portland. Water leaked through a crack in the ceiling, dripping steadily into a plastic bucket she positioned beside the second-hand crib where her daughter Aria slept. The child was 18 months old, small for her age, with dark curls that stuck to her forehead in the humid air. Tonight, she'd finally fallen asleep after hours of fussing, her fever breaking just before midnight. Lena sat hunched over her laptop at the cramped kitchen table, the glow of the screen illuminating her exhausted face. She'd been awake for nearly 20 hours, having worked a double shift at the Grandview Hotel downtown, scrubbing bathrooms and changing sheets in rooms that cost more per night than she earned in a week. Her back ached, her hands were raw from industrial cleaning chemicals, and her eyes burned with fatigue. But she couldn't sleep yet. The electricity bill was overdue, and she needed to transfer the last $43 from her account before they shut off the power. Her phone buzzed on the table, the screen lighting up with an incoming video call. Lena glanced at it, expecting her younger sister Jade, who often checked in late at night. Without thinking, still focused on the laptop, she reached over and tapped accept. "Jade, I can't talk long. I'm trying to," Lena began, her eyes still on the computer screen. "This isn't Jade." The voice was deep, controlled, distinctly masculine. Lena's head snapped toward her phone in shock. On the small screen was a man's face, sharp-featured and handsome in an austere way, with steel-gray eyes that seemed to pierce through the digital barrier. He wore a tailored shirt, the top button undone, and behind him she could see floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a glittering cityscape she didn't recognize. Her breath caught. I'm sorry, I thought you were someone else. Wrong number." Her finger moved to end the call, but then Aria whimpered in her sleep, a soft sound that carried across the small apartment. The man's eyes shifted, his gaze moving past Lena to something behind her. His expression changed, not dramatically, but enough that Lena noticed. His jaw tightened. His eyes widened fractionally. "Whose child is this?" he whispered, his voice barely audible, yet carrying an intensity that made Lena's stomach clench. She turned to look at Aria, then back at the screen, confusion flooding her. "My daughter." "What?" The man said nothing for a long moment. He simply stared, his face draining of color. Lena could see his hand trembling slightly as it gripped the phone. His lips parted as if to speak, then closed again. The silence stretched unbearably. "Who are you?" Lena demanded, her protective instincts flaring. "Why are you asking about my daughter?" He blinked, seeming to gather himself. "I'm sorry. This was clearly a mistake. I was trying to reach someone else." But he didn't hang up. His eyes kept drifting past her to where Aria slept, and Lena could see something raw and unguarded in his expression. Shock, perhaps, or recognition, or something she couldn't name. "You should go," Lena said firmly, reaching for the button. "Wait," he said quickly. "Your daughter, how old is she?" Every maternal alarm in Lena's body screamed. "That's none of your business. I'm ending this call." "Please," he said, and the desperation in his voice stopped her. "Just tell me, what's her name?" Lena's hand hovered over the screen. Something in his tone, not threatening, but pleading, made her hesitate. "Aria," she said quietly. "Her name is Aria." The man closed his eyes, his face contorting with an emotion Lena couldn't read. When he opened them again, they glistened with unshed tears. "I need to speak with you," he said, his voice rough. "Not now, not like this. But soon. Please." "I don't even know who you are," Lena protested. "My name is Julian Cross," he said. "And I think your daughter might be connected to something I lost." Before Lena could respond, before she could demand answers, the call ended abruptly, leaving her staring at her own shocked reflection in the darkened screen. Her heart pounded. Her mind raced with 1,000 questions. Who was Julian Cross? Why had he reacted that way to seeing Aria? What could he possibly have lost that had anything to do with her daughter? She looked at Aria, sleeping peacefully in the flickering light of the laptop, and felt a cold fear settle in her chest. Something had just shifted in her world, some invisible foundation cracking beneath her feet. And though she didn't yet know it, that wrong video call would become the catalyst that would unravel secrets she'd never wanted to face, and connect her to a man whose grief and wealth would collide with her poverty and pride in ways neither of them could escape. Lena didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the water-stained ceiling, listening to the rain and Aria's soft breathing, replaying those 5 whispered words over and over. Whose child is this? The way Julian Cross had looked at her daughter, as if he'd seen a ghost, as if the world had tilted beneath him, terrified her in ways she couldn't articulate. By morning, exhaustion weighed on her like wet concrete. She dressed Aria in the warmest clothes they owned and prepared for another shift at the Grandview Hotel. The luxury property stood 40 stories high in the heart of Portland's financial district, a glass monument to wealth that Lena entered each day through the service entrance like a shadow passing through light. She clocked in at 7, nodded to the other housekeepers, and began her rounds on the 23rd floor. Room after room of pristine white linens, marble bathrooms, and views that stretched to the mountains. She worked mechanically, her mind still churning with questions about the stranger on the video call. Around noon, her supervisor Mrs. Chun found her in the linen closet. "Moretti, you're being reassigned today. Executive floor." One of the girls called in sick. Lena's stomach dropped. The executive floor, the 45th, was reserved for VIPs, celebrities, and the ultra-wealthy who paid obscene amounts for privacy and luxury. Housekeepers avoided it when possible. The guests were demanding, the standards impossibly high, and mistakes meant termination. "I've never worked executive," Lena protested. "Well, you are today. Get your card." An hour later, Lena pushed her cleaning cart out of the service elevator onto the 45th floor. The hallway was wider here, the carpet plush beneath her feet, the artwork on the walls worth more than she'd earn in a lifetime. Only 6 suites occupied the entire floor, each one larger than most apartments. She checked her assignment sheet. Suite 4501. Her hands trembled slightly as she knocked. Housekeeping. Silence. She knocked again, waited the required 30 seconds, then used her keycard. The door swung open to reveal a suite that stole her breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, modern furniture in blacks and grays, a grand piano in the corner. The space was immaculate except for a laptop open on the desk and a half-empty glass of whiskey on the coffee table. Lena began working quickly, changing linens in the bedroom, scrubbing the marble bathroom. She was dusting the living area when she heard the suite door open. She turned, apology already forming on her lips for not finishing yet, and froze. Julian Cross stood in the doorway, still as stone. He wore a charcoal suit, the jacket draped over one arm, his steel-gray eyes locked on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Recognition flashed across his face, followed by something that looked like shock. "You," he said quietly. Lena's heart hammered. I didn't know this was your room. I can come back later." "No." His voice was firm, but not unkind. He stepped inside, letting the door close behind him. "Don't go." She stood gripping the dust cloth, acutely aware of her faded uniform, her hair pulled back in a practical bun, the vast distance between his tailored perfection and her worn poverty. "I should finish quickly so you can." "What's your name?" he interrupted. "You know my name. I told you last night." "Your full name." She hesitated, every instinct screaming to run. But something in his expression, not threatening, but desperate, held her in place. "Lena Moretti." Julian's jaw tightened. He moved to the windows, his back to her, hands pressed against the glass. "And Aria, your daughter. How old did you say she was?" "I didn't. And I'm not going to discuss my daughter with a stranger." He turned to face her, and she saw the raw emotion carved into his features. "I know this seems insane. I know you have every reason to be afraid. But please, I need to understand something." "Understand what?" Lena demanded, anger flaring through her fear. "Why you stared at my child like you'd seen her before? Why you asked those questions?" "Because," Julian said, his voice breaking slightly, "she looks exactly like someone I lost." The words landed like stones in still water. Lena felt something shift in the air between them, some invisible current of shared pain. "Who?" Julian closed his eyes. "My daughter, Victoria. She would have been 2 years old next month." She and my wife died in childbirth 26 months ago. The grief in his voice was so visceral that Lena felt her anger dissolve into something softer. She'd known loss too. Aria's father had vanished the moment she'd told him she was pregnant, leaving her alone to navigate pregnancy, birth, and the brutal reality of single motherhood in poverty. But this man's pain was different, deeper, the kind that carved canyons through his soul. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "but my daughter isn't. She can't be connected to your loss." "That's impossible." "I know," Julian said, opening his eyes. "Logically, I know that. But when I saw her last night on that video call, the shape of her face, her eyes, even the way she slept, it was like looking at the daughter I never got to meet. The ultrasound images I'd memorized, the features the doctors had described." He paused, struggling. "I haven't felt anything in 2 years except emptiness. And then I saw Aria, and something in me broke open." Lena's throat tightened. She understood that kind of desperate recognition, the way grief could warp reality, make you see ghosts in the faces of strangers. "Mr. Cross." "Julian." "Please." "Julian," she corrected softly. "I think you're seeing what you need to see. Loss does that. It makes us look for pieces of what we've lost in places they can't possibly be." He studied her for a long moment. "You speak from experience." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "Aria's father left before she was born. I've looked for him in every man who smiles at her in the grocery store, every stranger who stops to say she's beautiful. I've imagined him regretting his choice, coming back, wanting to know her." She shook her head. "But he won't. And your daughter, I'm sorry, but she's gone. Aria isn't her." Julian crossed the room slowly, stopping a respectful distance away. "You're right. I know you're right. But could I? Would you let me help you? You and Aria?" Lena stiffened. "I don't need charity." "It's not charity," he said quickly. "It's selfish, actually. Being near your daughter, even just knowing she's safe, that she has what she needs, it eases something in me. The guilt, maybe. The failure I've carried since I couldn't save my own child." "You can't save your daughter through mine," Lena said gently. "I know. But maybe I can do what I should have done. Be present, be useful, make sure a child doesn't suffer when I have the means to prevent it." His eyes met hers. "I'm not asking you to accept pity. I'm asking you to let me do something good with this grief before it destroys me completely." Lena stood paralyzed by the raw honesty in his voice. Part of her wanted to refuse, to protect her pride, to keep the careful walls she'd built between herself and anyone who might hurt her. But another part, the part that had stayed awake last night worrying about the electricity bill, about Aria's persistent cough, about the mold growing behind the bathroom sink, whispered that maybe, just maybe, accepting help wasn't the same as surrendering dignity. "I don't even know you," she whispered. "Then let's change that," Julian said. "Have dinner with me. Tomorrow night. Bring Aria. Just a conversation. No obligations, no strings. Just two people who've survived loss, trying to find meaning in it." Lena's hands trembled. Every rational thought screamed that this was dangerous, that billionaires didn't invite housekeepers to dinner without ulterior motives, that she was being naive. But something in Julian's eyes, that shared recognition of pain, silenced the warnings. "One dinner," she said finally. "But if this gets strange, if you cross any lines—" "I won't," he promised. "You have my word." As Lena left the suite 20 minutes later, her cleaning cart rattling down the plush hallway, she felt the foundation of her carefully controlled life beginning to crack. She'd built everything on the principle of self-reliance, on never needing anyone, on protecting Aria from a world that took more than it gave. But Julian Cross had looked at her daughter and seen his own lost child. And somehow, impossibly, that shared grief had opened a door Lena hadn't known existed, a door that terrified her precisely because she so desperately wanted to walk through it. The dinner took place at a small Italian restaurant tucked away in the Pearl District, far from the glittering towers where Julian normally spent his evenings. Lena had insisted on somewhere modest, somewhere she wouldn't feel like an exhibit under glass. She arrived with Aria bundled against the October chill, her daughter's dark curls peeking out from beneath a knit cap. Julian was already waiting at a corner table, dressed in jeans and a simple sweater that made him look younger, less intimidating. When he saw Aria, his expression softened in a way that made Lena's chest tighten. He didn't rush forward or overwhelm the child. He simply smiled gently and said, "Hello, Aria." The toddler peered at him shyly from behind Lena's leg, then offered a tentative wave. Julian's eyes glistened, but he kept his composure, pulling out a chair for Lena with quiet courtesy. They talked carefully at first, dancing around the deeper truths. Julian explained that he'd built his fortune in renewable energy technology, that he'd grown up in Seattle with parents who valued education over wealth, though they'd had neither. Lena shared fragments of her own story, growing up in New Mexico, moving to Portland for college, having to drop out when Aria came. She spoke of cleaning hotel rooms, of pride that warred with exhaustion, of loving her daughter more than breathing, but sometimes feeling like she was drowning. Throughout the meal, Julian's attention kept drifting to Aria. The child sat in a high chair, playing with crayons the restaurant provided, occasionally offering him a scribbled masterpiece. Each time she did, he accepted it with reverence, as if she'd handed him something precious. "Tell me about your wife," Lena said quietly, after Aria had settled into coloring. "If you want to." Julian's fingers tightened around his water glass. "Her name was Rebecca. We met in graduate school. She was studying environmental law, wanted to change the world through policy. She was brilliant, fierce, endlessly optimistic." He paused, struggling. "When she got pregnant, she was terrified and thrilled in equal measure. We'd only been married a year, but she threw herself into preparing, reading every book, taking every class. She was going to be an extraordinary mother." "What happened?" Lena asked gently. "Complications during labor. The umbilical cord wrapped around Victoria's neck. They tried everything: emergency surgery, resuscitation. Rebecca hemorrhaged. I was in the waiting room when they told me I'd lost them both within minutes of each other." His voice cracked. "I never even got to hold my daughter. Never heard her cry, never saw her eyes open. She was just gone." Lena reached across the table instinctively, covering his hand with hers. "I'm so sorry, Julian. No one should carry that kind of loss." He looked down at their joined hands, and something passed between them. Recognition deeper than words, the understanding of two people who'd survived different hells but emerged equally scarred. Over the following weeks, an unexpected pattern emerged. Julian began appearing in Lena's life with careful intention. A text asking if Aria needed winter clothes led to boxes delivered to her apartment. Not excessive, just warm coats and sturdy boots. When Lena mentioned the mold problem to her landlord with no response, Julian quietly arranged for a remediation team, framing it as a building-wide initiative so she wouldn't feel singled out. He never overstepped, never pushed, but his presence became a steady current in their lives. One evening, he invited them to his penthouse apartment in the Cascade Tower. Lena hesitated, but curiosity won. The space was enormous, decorated in minimalist grays and blacks, every surface spotless and cold. But in the living room, she found something unexpected, a corner filled with children's toys, still in packaging, arranged with touching care. "I bought them after Victoria died," Julian admitted quietly. "I couldn't help myself. Every store I passed, I'd see something she might have liked. So I'd buy it, and bring it home, and tell myself I was being ridiculous." He looked at Aria, who was staring wide-eyed at a stuffed giraffe nearly as tall as she was. "They've sat here untouched for 2 years. Would Aria want them?" Lena's throat tightened. She saw the vulnerability in his question, the way he needed this more than Aria did. "Are you sure? Please," he whispered. "Let me give them to someone who can actually use them." Aria squealed with delight as Julian carefully unwrapped a musical mobile, and Lena watched a man who'd built an empire of technology crouch on the floor, showing a toddler how to make plastic butterflies spin and chime. The tenderness in his movements, the genuine joy that cracked through his grief, it undid something in her carefully constructed walls. Later, after Aria fell asleep on Julian's couch surrounded by new toys, he and Lena stood by the windows overlooking the glittering city. The silence between them was comfortable now, born of shared understanding. "Why are you really doing this?" Lena asked softly. "The truth, Julian." He was quiet for a long moment. "Because when Rebecca died, I shut down completely. Sold our house, threw myself into work, built walls so high nothing could reach me. I told myself grief was private, that needing help was weakness. I nearly destroyed myself." He turned to face her. "Then I saw Aria on that video call, and something in me cracked open. Not because she's Victoria, I know she's not, but because she reminded me that life continues, that children still laugh and grow and need, whether I'm grieving or not. And you, his voice softened. You reminded me that strength isn't refusing help. It's surviving despite everything trying to break you. Lena felt tears slip down her cheeks. I've been so afraid, she admitted. Afraid of needing anyone. Afraid of being seen as weak. Afraid that if I let anyone in, they'll leave like Aria's father did. Like everyone always does. Julian stepped closer, his hand reaching up to gently brush a tear from her face. I can't promise I'll never disappoint you, but I can promise I won't leave. Not unless you ask me to. The air between them shifted, charged with something neither had expected. Lena felt her heart racing, felt the dangerous pull of hope after years of guarding against it. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this strange connection forged through grief and accidental video calls could become something real. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. How to let someone in. Neither do I, Julian admitted. But maybe we can learn together. When Aria woke an hour later, rubbing her eyes sleepily, she reached not for Lena but for Julian. And when he lifted her into his arms without hesitation, holding her with the careful reverence of someone who'd lost everything and was slowly learning to hold something precious again, Lena felt the last of her walls begin to crumble. This wasn't charity. It wasn't pity. It was two broken people finding unexpected healing in each other's wounds, and a child who'd become the bridge between grief and hope. The turning point came on a Wednesday morning when Lena arrived at the Grandview Hotel to find her supervisor waiting with two security guards and a woman in a corporate suit she'd never seen before. Ms. Moretti, please come with us, the woman said curtly. Lena's stomach dropped. She followed them to a small office off the main lobby, her mind racing through every possible mistake she might have made. The woman introduced herself as Patricia Hoffman, Director of Human Resources. We've received a complaint, Patricia said, sliding a folder across the desk. From a guest on the executive floor. Julian Cross. The room tilted. Lena gripped the edge of the desk. What kind of complaint? Patricia's expression was cold, professional. He claims you've been soliciting personal favors, using your position to gain access to his suite outside of cleaning hours, and making inappropriate requests for financial assistance. She paused. There are also allegations that you've been bringing your child to work, which violates hotel policy. That's not true, Lena said, her voice shaking. None of that is true. Julian and I were friends. He never filed any complaint. We have documentation, Ms. Moretti. Emails, text logs, all bearing Mr. Cross's digital signature. Lena's hands trembled as she opened the folder. The emails were there, clinical and damning, describing a pattern of manipulation and inappropriate behavior. But the words were wrong, the phrasing too formal, nothing like how Julian actually spoke. These are fake, she insisted. Someone forged these. Julian would never. Mr. Cross is one of our most valued clients. Patricia interrupted. We take these allegations very seriously. Until we complete our investigation, you're suspended without pay. And if these claims are substantiated, you'll be terminated and potentially face legal action for harassment. The walls closed in. Lena thought of her rent due in 5 days, of Aria's doctor appointment next week, of the carefully balanced budget that had no room for missing even a single paycheck. Please, she whispered. Let me talk to him. Let me prove this is a mistake. Contact with Mr. Cross is strictly forbidden during the investigation. Any attempt to reach him will be considered witness tampering. Patricia stood, her tone final. Clean out your locker. Security will escort you from the building. Lena walked out of the Grandview Hotel in a daze. The autumn sun too bright, the city sounds too loud. She tried calling Julian, but his phone went straight to voicemail. She tried texting, but the messages showed as undelivered. It was as if he'd vanished or blocked her completely. By evening, the situation metastasized. A gossip website published an article. Tech billionaire Julian Cross harassed by hotel maid. Accuses single mother of extortion scheme. The piece included grainy photos of Lena entering Julian's building, of them at the restaurant, framed to look clandestine and damning. The comments section exploded with vitriol. Lena's phone rang constantly, reporters, strangers, people hurling accusations. She turned it off, pulled Aria close, and tried to understand how everything had collapsed so completely. The next morning, a lawyer appeared at her door. Tall, immaculate, carrying a briefcase embossed with the logo of one of Portland's most prestigious firms. Ms. Moretti, I'm David Chun, representing the Cross Foundation. I need you to sign these documents ceasing all contact with Mr. Cross and agreeing not to pursue any financial claims against him. I never wanted his money, Lena said, her voice hoarse from crying. I need to talk to him. Please. That's not possible. Sign the documents, and we'll provide a one-time settlement of $50,000 to help you relocate and start over elsewhere. The offer was a knife wrapped in velvet. $50,000 would change her life, would give Aria stability. But accepting it meant admitting guilt, meant walking away from Julian without understanding what had happened, without fighting for the truth. No, Lena said quietly. I won't sign. The lawyer's expression hardened. Then you leave us no choice. We'll pursue harassment charges and ensure you never work in hospitality again. Think carefully, Ms. Moretti. Think about your daughter. After he left, Lena sank to the floor, Aria playing innocently beside her. She'd been a fool to believe a billionaire could care about someone like her, that their connection meant anything beyond his temporary need for absolution. She'd let her guard down, let herself hope, and now she was paying the price. That night, she began packing. Not because she'd signed anything, but because staying in Portland had become impossible. The landlord had already received calls, reporters camped outside her building, and neighbors whispered when she passed. She would take Aria and disappear, maybe back to New Mexico, maybe somewhere new. She would survive, because she always did. But as she folded Aria's clothes, the warm winter coat Julian had given her, the soft pajamas, the stuffed giraffe her daughter refused to sleep without, grief overwhelmed her. Not just for herself, but for Julian, who'd seemed so close to healing, so close to finding peace. Whatever had happened, whoever had orchestrated this destruction, they'd hurt him too. She was placing the last box by the door when someone knocked. Lena froze, expecting the lawyer again, or reporters, or building management with an eviction notice. Instead, when she opened the door, Julian stood there. He looked terrible, unshaven, his eyes bloodshot, his expensive clothes rumpled. He stared at her with such raw desperation that Lena's anger dissolved into confusion. They told me you were extorting me, he said hoarsely. Showed me documents, recordings, things that looked real but felt wrong. I didn't believe them, but they had evidence, and my legal team insisted. He stopped, his voice breaking. I tried to reach you. They blocked everything. Said it was for my protection. Who did? Lena whispered. My board of directors. My late wife's family. People who think they're protecting my interests by destroying anything that threatens their control. His hands shook. They've been monitoring me since Rebecca died, watching for any sign I might move on, might find happiness outside their influence. When they discovered us, they decided you were a threat. Lena's breath caught. The emails, the accusations. Fabricated. All of it. I never filed any complaint. I didn't even know about it until yesterday when my assistant finally broke ranks and told me what was happening. Julian stepped closer, his eyes pleading. I'm so sorry, Lena. I should have protected you better. I should have anticipated they'd do something like this. She wanted to be angry, to blame him for the destruction of her life. But looking at his devastated expression, she saw only another victim of the same machinery that had tried to grind her down. What do we do now? She asked quietly. Julian's jaw tightened with determination. We fight back. Together. If you'll let me. Lena looked at Aria, sleeping peacefully despite the chaos, then back at Julian. The easy choice would be to walk away, to protect herself and her daughter from further damage. But she'd spent her entire life running from pain, building walls against disappointment. Maybe it was time to stand and fight. Together, she echoed, and felt something fierce and unbreakable forge between them in that moment. Not just connection, but alliance. Julian's first move was swift and public. Within 48 hours, he held a press conference in the lobby of the Cascade Tower, every major news outlet present. Lena stood beside him, Aria in her arms, her heart hammering as cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. Julian's voice cut through the chaos, steady and unyielding. I'm here to address the false allegations that have been circulated regarding Ms. Lena Moretti. These claims were fabricated by individuals within my own organization who sought to control my personal life and business decisions. I have evidence of document forgery, unauthorized use of my digital credentials, and a coordinated campaign to destroy an innocent woman's reputation. He pulled out a folder, handed copies to the journalists. These are communications between my board members and my late wife's family, explicitly discussing how to eliminate the distraction I'd found in Ms. Moretti and her daughter. They saw our friendship as a threat to their influence over my company and my estate. The room erupted. Questions flew like bullets. Julian answered each one with devastating precision, naming names, providing timestamps, dismantling the conspiracy piece by piece. When someone asked why he cared so much about defending a hotel housekeeper, his response silenced the room. Because Ms. Moretti reminded me that wealth and power mean nothing if you use them to crush people instead of lifting them up. My late wife believed that deeply. I'd forgotten it until Lena showed me what real strength looks like. Raising a child alone, working multiple shifts, refusing handouts even when desperate, and still finding the grace to show kindness to a stranger drowning in grief. He turned to look at Lena, his eyes fierce. She deserves better than to be collateral damage in someone else's power play. The backlash was immediate and brutal. 3 board members resigned under pressure. Rebecca's family issued a statement claiming they'd acted out of concern for Julian's well-being, but public opinion had already turned against them. The hotel reinstated Lena with full back pay and a formal apology, though she knew she'd never return to that job. But the victory felt hollow. The media's scrutiny intensified, now framing their relationship as a redemption story, a fairy tale. Photographers followed them everywhere. Strangers approached Arya in grocery stores. The pressure of being watched, analyzed, turned into entertainment. It suffocated Lena in ways the poverty never had. One evening, she broke down in Julian's apartment while Arya played nearby. "I can't do this," she sobbed. "Everyone watching, judging, waiting for us to fail. I'm not built for this kind of life. I just wanted to raise my daughter in peace." Julian knelt beside her, his hand gentle on her shoulder. "Then we'll find peace. Away from here, away from all of it. You can't just walk away from your company, your life. Watch me," he said firmly. "I built that empire to honor Rebecca's memory, to create something meaningful. But somewhere along the way, it became a prison. The board, the expectations, the constant performance. I was surviving, not living." His eyes met hers. "You and Arya showed me the difference. I won't sacrifice that to appease people who see me as an asset to manage instead of a human being." Within a month, Julian restructured everything. He stepped down as CEO, installed leadership he trusted, and converted his majority stake into a trust benefiting environmental causes Rebecca had championed. He kept enough to live comfortably, but divested himself of the crushing weight of empire. They left Portland quietly one November morning, driving south toward the Oregon coast. Julian had purchased a small house in a town called Manzanita. Nothing extravagant, just a cottage with a view of the ocean and enough space for the 3 of them. Lena had initially protested, but Julian insisted it was in both their names, a partnership rather than charity. The first morning in their new home, Lena awoke to find Julian and Arya on the beach, the toddler shrieking with joy as waves chased her feet. Julian caught her when she stumbled, spun her around, his laughter carrying on the salt wind. Watching them, Lena felt something loosen in her chest, the fear that had gripped her for so long, the certainty that happiness was always temporary. She enrolled in online classes to finish her accounting degree. Julian started a consulting firm helping small renewable energy startups, working from home so he could be present for Arya's daily adventures. They built a life that looked nothing like either of them had imagined. Quieter, simpler, infinitely richer than the sum of Julian's former wealth. One evening, 6 months after the move, they sat on the porch while Arya slept inside. The sunset painted the sky in golds and purples, waves murmuring their eternal rhythm. "Do you ever regret it?" Lena asked quietly. "Everything you gave up." Julian considered the question seriously. "I regret that it took me so long to realize what mattered. I regret the years I spent hiding from grief instead of healing from it. But this," he gestured to the cottage, the ocean, the life they'd built. "This is the first thing that's felt real since Rebecca died." Lena leaned her head on his shoulder. "I was so angry when we met. Angry at the world, at Arya's father, at myself for needing help. I thought accepting anything from you meant admitting I'd failed. And now I understand that we're all broken in different ways. You were drowning in wealth and grief. I was drowning in poverty and pride. We didn't save each other. We just reminded each other how to swim. Julian turned to face her, his hand cupping her cheek with infinite tenderness. I love you, Lena Moretti. Not because you needed saving, and not because Aria reminded me of what I lost. I love you because you're fierce and stubborn and brave enough to build a life from nothing and still find room to be kind. Tears spilled down Lena's cheeks. I love you too. Even though you answer wrong video calls in the middle of the night and ask strange questions about people's children. They both laughed, the sound mixing with the ocean's whisper. Inside, Aria called out sleepily, and they rose together, moving toward the sound of their daughter, because somewhere along the way, that's what she'd become. Not a replacement for Victoria, not a charity case, but simply their child, loved and wanted and whole. The story could have ended there, a neat resolution wrapped in ocean sunsets and hard-won peace. But life was messier than narratives. There were still hard days when Lena doubted herself, when Julian woke from nightmares about Rebecca, when money was tight and the weight of their pasts pressed heavy. But they'd learned something essential. Healing wasn't a destination, but a practice. Every morning they chose each other. Every night they chose gratitude over bitterness. And Aria grew up knowing that family wasn't defined by biology or circumstance, but by the people who showed up, day after day, choosing love over fear. Years later, when someone asked Lena about the wrong video call that changed everything, she'd smile and say, "It wasn't wrong at all. It was exactly the call I needed to answer. Not because it brought me money or security, but because it brought me home to people who saw me, all of me, and loved me anyway." And Julian, holding Aria's hand as they walked the beach collecting shells, would add quietly, "Sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in our deepest wounds. You just have to be brave enough to unwrap them." Their life wasn't a fairy tale, but it was true and honest and filled with the kind of love that only comes from surviving darkness together and choosing, every single day, to turn toward the light. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.